Good morning. My name is Alexandra DiPentima. I have the pleasure of interviewing Judge Anne Dranginis. Today is Wednesday, February 9th, 2005. I am conducting this interview as part of the Connecticut Bar Foundation James W. Cooper Fellows Oral History of Connecticut Women in the Legal Profession Project. This project is sponsored by the Connecticut Bar Foundation. And it is my particular pleasure to conduct this interview because I am one of the women who has certainly benefited from your experiences and your generous spirit in sharing those experiences as a woman in the legal profession. Why don't we begin this interview by your telling me a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, and your background.
Well, I guess I was very lucky to grow up in Litchfield County, Connecticut. I was born in Waterbury. My mom was from Waterbury, my father was from Torrington, and they had already moved to Goshen, which is as different from those city environments as you can get. And I had a pretty simple childhood, I think. You know, had a lot of time to play independently out of doors. I have one sister who is 18 months older than I am. My mother was a school teacher. In fact, at about age 4, she went back to work as a teacher in a private school in Litchfield, the Sarka School. And in those days, there was no such thing as daycare, so I was to tag along with her, and I went to the nursery school there. And then the next year, I went to first grade, and she was my first grade teacher. And I had to call her Mrs. Dranginis, and I had to leave all the tough questions for her. She would always say, "Oh, don't ask me now, wait till later at home." But it was an interesting place and time to grow up. Of course, I heard those stories like a lot of people in my generation, the baby boomers, about living through the Depression and living through World War II. My father served in the military. He was 4 years in Bora Bora and didn't see any action, but they got ready to see action, especially if Australia fell to the Japanese. So it was a time of great storytelling about the great events of the greatest generation. So I grew up with all of those stories about how Daddy got one Christmas an orange in his stocking for Christmas because they had so little. My dad worked as a skilled machinist at the Torrington Company, which was a commercial needle and bearing operation in Torrington. He came home from being away at the war and really never wanted to move away from home. His parents still lived in Torrington. We saw them a couple of times a week. And my mother's family lived in Waterbury, and we went to Waterbury every Sunday for dinner, promptly after church. We went to Waterbury where they had playgrounds with slides and swings, and of course we went in those marvelous little dresses that we went to church in, and it was always a great frustration that we couldn't go out and play in a playground, which we didn't have where we lived in the country. I went to school at Goshen when I was old enough to be admitted into the public schools, and I had already gone to first grade. And I left, and my mom told me to go to first grade to report to school. And of course, in those days, children did exactly what they were told by their parents. They might have grumbled in the background, but there was no sense that
There was a debate?
No debate with the parents. And so I went to first grade and presented myself, and I was told, "Oh, we know about you. You already know how to learn. You know how to read, so go to second grade." And I met great friends in school that I've kept to this day. One of my best friends is who I still see frequently. I met the first day in second grade because he had had some medical problems and wore a brace, so he did first grade at home.
And you're one of those unusual people who actually lives in the same area you grew up in.
Yeah, it's very unusual because to have the kind of challenging work that I've had and to be able to live in a place like Litchfield is pretty unusual. So it's been really great. I went to a regional high school. I went to Wamogo, and I was a cheerleader. Of course, that was in the days before Title IX, and women's athletics were so different then. I played basketball for a while, but it was such a boring game then because we played half court. And then at some point there would be one roving guard, and it was the most aggravating thing. My father, because he had 2 girls, would volunteer for the Tri-Town Little League, and he was always the behind-the-plate umpire. His credentials were impeccable. He had no boys who played in the Little League games. And I was a pretty good athlete, and I never could understand why they wouldn't let me play. I couldn't even be the bat girl. I couldn't be allowed past that gate that was on the field. And I didn't understand it because I could throw the ball. I mean, when I grew up in an athletic kind of family, everybody was into sports, and it was not permitted that you threw a ball like a girl or ran like a girl. You were taught, to play with the boys and to keep up. So it was kind of interesting to me, and even when I was very young, I had the sense that there were things that I couldn't do because of my gender. And I bristled at them at that point, and probably I could be accused of still bristling about those things today.
Well, at that point, Anne, did you have any role models at those early years?
Oh, yeah. Well, my mother spent a great deal of time, when everybody came back from the war, and my father and his 2 brothers got married during that period of time, and it seemed that everybody went home to Grandma and Grandpa Dranginis' house in Torrington, and they stayed there until they established their own homes. And it was usually just a matter of months, but at that time, a young woman who lived on George Street in Torrington with her aunts, Patricia McGowan, went to Yale Law School. And she is Patricia McGowan Wald of the D.C. court, and has served in the war tribunals in, I think, Bosnia. And she was really the first woman that my mother told me about. And she said, you could do something like that. And I was very little when I was introduced to the topic of there are plenty of things that you can do that are, somebody might say, oh, maybe you shouldn't go there.
So your parents, or your mother in particular, encouraged you, despite the fact that you were aware at that point gender appeared to set up obstacles to what you wanted
absolutely.
to do.
Yeah, and it was, I think that the other thing that happened in our family, and my sister and I talk about this a lot, is that, there were 2 of us, and we were girls, and education was absolutely the ultimate. It was how you enriched your life. It was how you made a better life for yourself. Consistent with that upward mobility that happened for people. My father's parents actually emigrated from Lithuania, and my mother's forebears had been here since the time of the Civil War. So the Irish half, of me had been in this country for many more generations. But always it was about education. And it was always about being involved and making a contribution. Both of my parents were very involved in civic activities and in politics. And it was, generally accepted and expected that we would always do our best. There was never a time when my parents didn't pressure me to do better. It was a consistent message. I also had a very important maternal aunt in my life who was a career woman, and she never married. And so I had that kind of paradigm of the successful professional woman, but who had her profession and her extended family, but did not have her own marriage or children. And she was a wonderful, wonderful person, died very young, and it was a real blow. She died right after I passed the bar exam.
Oh, but she knew that you had gone
Yeah.
into a career.
Yeah.
Maybe we could talk a little bit about education, exactly what your experience in your education brought you.
Well, it's, always loved school. I mean, I loved a lot of different things. And I went to Manhattanville College, which was at that time Manhattanville College of the Sacred Heart. It was a woman's, Catholic women's college. During the time I was there, it broke its affiliation with the church because that was the only way they could get federal funds to stay in business. And like a lot of small liberal arts colleges, it felt the pressures of the purse. So, but my sister was there, and I had wanted to go to one of the 7 sister schools and didn't get in. And it was a horrible disappointment to me, horrible disappointment. But I got a scholarship, a partial scholarship at Manhattanville because my sister was there. And my parents were just thrilled to death that I was going to be in the same school. And Daddy particularly was happy because he only had to drive in one direction. Of course, those were the days when you could take 2 daughters to college in a sedan and just fill up the trunk. And far be it from us to have that experience today, but
Things change very quickly.
yes, they do, they do. And when we got to Manhattanville, when my class year graduated from Manhattanville in 1969, we could not wear pants on campus. We had a curfew at 10 p.m. We had 2 hotels we could stay in the city, and they checked us in. On weekends, I think the curfew might have been 11 or 12, but we actually signed in at the hotel if we went to New York. And by the time we left college, we were permitted to have boys visit in the rooms. I mean, there was that whole sea change
That was the
from
time, yeah.
1965 to 1969. But this horrible event that I was got at this same school with my sister turned into a really great experience because I met lifelong friends there, women who have been so strong and successful in so many different ways. But I got that wonderful, strong Sacred Heart education and was also able to work in Robert Kennedy's Senate office in New York City. We would hop on the train on Tuesdays and Thursday afternoon and go down and do research or constituent letters, draft correspondence, and just generally be very involved.
Was that 68? Was that right?
In 67 and 68, I did that. So, and as a matter of fact, had been offered a job in the campaign headquarters in New York for the summer for the 68 campaign, which, of course, my parents were not going to let me do that. But I was in the process of, duking it out with them about whether or not I would, go, and it was going to be a paid position, and he was assassinated. So,
Was that your first experience in politics?
oh Lord, no. My father ran. We were Catholics and Democrats in Goshen, Connecticut, which was a very, rural, small town Connecticut, very Republican, very Congregationalist, so we were kind of outsiders. But in any event, it was, in those days, in 1960 particularly, there was still a representative in the state legislature from each town. And so my father was the Democratic nominee. And of course there was no way he was going to win. But we did door to door and we handed out leaflets for John Kennedy. And that was a really, a very important election because John Kennedy was a Roman Catholic and actually had a chance to win. And there were people in our school who would say, we can't have a Catholic be president. I mean, they discounted that notion, saying that the Pope would run the country. We just all dismissed that as pure nonsense even then. So I had a lot of interest in politics because my parents talked about politics a lot. They talked about politics in the past. And my mother's family had been involved in politics. My maternal grandfather was a reform candidate in Waterbury in that, I believe, 1933 election, where former Governor Rowland's grandfather became, I think, comptroller of the city of Waterbury, and the defalcations in the Hayes administration were found.
The politics that's obviously was a part of really influenced you early on, and you ended up working for Robert Kennedy. Is that what led you to think about law?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And not necessarily because I expected to be a judge someday, or I saw the people who worked around Senator Kennedy as all having law degrees, whether they were his legislative aides, his administrative aides, people who were working within the system to affect change and to take perhaps a political agenda and make it work for people. And I thought it was a wonderful thing to do. I had a facility for learning rules. When I was a sophomore in high school, I went up to UConn and I took the test to be a basketball referee. And I was allowed, I passed the test and was certified to referee games anywhere in the state of Connecticut, and people couldn't believe that as a sophomore in high school, I knew the rules, I could spot the rules and make the call. And, I think very often how what I do now is like being a rights referee. I said, I left my whistle at home, but, the ability to blow the whistle and, make the call is something that actually was good training for me in the long run.
I wouldn't have thought of it, but you're right.
No, it's those things in life that you don't think are ever going to make a difference that end up somehow, bringing, that experience. You bring that experience to bear, even if it's way in the back of your mind.
What I'm hearing is that politics and sports and education and public service were kind of early on in your life.
Oh, yeah. That whole noblesse oblige thing that the Sacred Heart preached was, I guess I was fed that concept from a very early age and received it. Because a lot of times I think it's frustrating because we talk about things and talk about concepts and how we want to live our lives, but you need to put them into action. And I don't think that I did that in any conscious way. And I say to my children now, the things that you think are your biggest disappointments or your biggest failures may actually turn into the most terrific, turn in the road in your life. And you just, to kind of sit back and, see how it comes out somehow. It all kind of flows. And it's the wonderful thing about life. It's so unexpected. And so I think that's something that has intrigued me my whole life.
And we were talking about your college experience and obviously the work you did with Robert Kennedy. Was there anything else during college that you look back and you say, boy, that was really one of those turns in the road or one of those people or?
Yeah, well, I was a philosophy major at Manhattanville, and Mother Mary Clark was a wonderful, wonderful woman who's just celebrated her 90th birthday. And she was energetic and so excited about the study of philosophy, something that you would think would be very dry and ponderous. And then I took a seminar with my two best friends, Marion and Joyce. One lives in Colorado, the other in New Jersey, and we've been friends since. But we took this seminar, a very small group, with professors Bob Auclair, who was the head of the English department at Manhattanville, and Ray Langley, who was head of the philosophy department. And they made learning fun, and it was very deep, but it was just a great experience.
And do you still have a relationship with Manhattanville?
Well, yes, I served for a year or so on the alumni board, but I just didn't have time to continue doing stuff like that. But I go back to events.
So it's still
and I've spoken there. Well, and it's close by, so it's not hard to get to. The other thing that I did in high school that I think informed some of, what I have done in life was I had a great time acting in school plays.
Oh.
And played the lead in our senior class play. We did The Diary of Anne Frank, and I played Anne Frank. And of course, her story is so wonderful. And to play her was really fun. And Sal Galino was our coach, our drama coach. He was the art
This
teacher.
is at Wamogo?
At Wamogo, yeah. He was a great guy. I still see a lot of the people that taught there because I'm in this community. So it's you gather strength from having those multi-generational friendships with people.
And what I'm struck by, Ann, is I think I mentioned it before, the fact that you're back, you're in the place you grew up, having done and continuing to do all these really remarkable things, but part of it is because of the support you've gotten.
Oh, yeah. And I say that
there.
to people all the time.
Yeah.
You know, people, you know, come up to me in the grocery store. You know, if there's, you know, when I was the administrative judge in Litchfield, if I did a case or something, people would come up and say to me, nice job.
Yeah.
You know, and to have that kind of validation. And also some of the people that had trouble in their life, you know, and made it through the trouble and, you know, got better. And I run into them in the grocery store too, and they say thanks for helping me out. And I think that that's, you know, a great thing too.
I think we could talk about law school if you're ready to do that, unless you have something else you want to talk about with college.
No, I think that...
since we're moving into your...
Right. I think that the work that I did with in Robert Kennedy's office led me to take the law boards. Everybody was, you know, God forbid we should have gone out and gotten a job after 4 years of college. You know, you get a good liberal arts education and you say, now what am I supposed to do? But that experience led a couple of us to take, instead of taking the GREs, the graduate record examinations, we took the law boards.
How many were there of you from Manhattanville?
I think it may have been about 6 of us. I had gone to the UConn Law School, which was on Asylum Avenue at that point, and not a, you know, it was not a great place. But it never occurred to me to apply anywhere else. I thought, well, if I'm going to give it a shot, I would do it there. And so I applied.
Right after Manhattanville?
Yeah, in my senior year. And I remember in the spring of senior year, going to the post office and getting this thin envelope and thinking, oh, you know, I didn't get in, because if you got a thin envelope, you didn't get in. And I opened it up, and it was this great letter, you know, we're thrilled to have you. And please send your $50 deposit. So I called my mother, naturally. You know, what is the first thing that one does when you get happy news, or for that matter, bad news? You call your mother. And so I said, oh my God, send them the money right away before they figure out that they might have made a mistake. And so that was great. And I went to Europe with my roommate, Mary, and my friend who lives in Colorado. And we went to Europe for 6.5 weeks after we graduated. And we had a great time. And when I got home, my mother greeted me with the fact that she had found me 2 roommates in an apartment in Hartford, in the West End of Hartford, so that I could, you know, go to law school. And this was all arranged. I had not spoken to these girls. My mother spoke to their mothers, and I was ensconced in this apartment with one young woman who was at the medical school and another law student. So we had, it was an extremely strange time, I think, even for the law school. There had been maybe 2 or 3 women in each class. And
before this?
Before our class, but the class of the UConn Law School class, graduating class of 1972, had 17 women. We were 10% of the class. So it was the first time that the professors, the administration, and the student body saw this influx. Now, I had a good friend who was married to a classmate of mine from Manhattanville, Celie Hubbard, who was a third-year student. So I met everybody, because he introduced me to everybody. And those were still the days when we would be, like at Manhattanville, we made it through exams by playing bridge. If you weren't studying or taking an exam, you were playing bridge at the end of the hallway. Well, we did that at law school. And, you know, when I think about the third-year students, I mean, I knew Wes Horton, who you worked with, and we all had a great time. Of course,
It was not a great physical facility.
No, it wasn't,
But-
but it was a really, we all were in such close quarters, and we saw each other on I think that there might have been 2 floors of classrooms, and there was one student, like cafeteria, where there were some machines or something where everybody congregated if you had to wait for a
Right.
class.
Yep. Yep.
It
was not, but somehow you made do.
Yeah,
you made
exactly.
good friends. That's true. Just going back a little bit, did you have any resistance in your family, either immediate or extended family, to your decision to go to law school?
Oh, no, they thought it was fabulous. And I think that my father, who was he had not gone to college. My mother went to college, but my father did not. I think that he was just amazed that I would have the gumption, as he would call it, to do that. And he called me kid a lot. And so all of the things that I did, he was, kind of perpetually amazed, but always very, very supportive.
Okay.
He was a very, very conscientious father.
And at law school, was there a generally support for women law students at that time?
No. We were taking the place of a man who would support his family. We were there to get a husband. We were there just to make a political statement. It wasn't always hard. I mean, there were a lot of students who were great to us, accepted us, helped us, and we were a very kind of mighty group. And there was strength in numbers. And of course, we were all different from one another. I mean, that was the other thing, that some people were good at some things and, had their various strengths.
Any women law professors at that?
Oh, Shirley Bysowitz was the only one.
Yeah.
And I don't think they gave her I don't think she was a full professor yet. And she had that struggle, but boy, was she fiery. I loved Shirley Bysowitz.
Yeah, she was there when I was at
Oh,
law
yeah.
school.
Well, she brought a
Wonderful.
lot of us along.
Yep.
And I remember spending a lot of time with Shirley because, of course, she taught the writing course. And we had to do that thing with moot court.
Yes. But she was it?
It wasn't a lot of credits, but you spent a lot of time on it. And she was the person who really taught us how to research. And I think that she had a lot of joy in the fact that so many women came into the school. And I think that helped her, push for what she deserved, which was to be a full professor. And something that had been denied her. So, but I remember her being very nurturing. I remember her having a great smile and a great laugh. I mean, she really got us all through a lot of the rough spots, so. She's a really neat lady. Professor Stevenson, he wrote that book on Connecticut civil
Yes.
procedure. Well, we had these small sections, and I was in his small section of civil procedure, and he terrified me. He'd get down on his desk and he would look at me and say, "Miss Dranginis," and I would just freeze. And I would say to him, I can't answer the question if you ask me like that. And of course that, instead of, understanding that maybe he could talk to me like he talked to the boys, and that, instead of, screaming at me and trying to intimidate me, but he was quite a character. And, it was great to have him learning those old, the shows in action and, trespass on the
Yep.
case.
Other than that experience with Professor Stevenson, are there any other particular events that kind of stick out in your mind?
Oh, yeah, we went to jail. Professor Orland, I think it was in the second year, and Ellen Lubell was on the trip, too. She was in my class and became the first woman public defender in the Superior Court system. We had taken criminal law, and I had done very well in it. I understood it and loved it. And so we took the corrections course, and as part of it, we went through the weekend training at the Haddam training facility that the Department of Corrections ran, and they threw us in jail for the weekend. Well,
You remember that.
oh, absolutely. It was really an eye-opening experience. I went, with it, then the Sunday Times cost $1, and I had a little dollar in my bag with my toothbrush, thinking, well, I can make it through Saturday, and on Sunday I can read the paper all day, like I did every other Sunday before I had children. And there was no New York Times on Sunday. I got thrown in the hole. All the women were strip searched, and when I told my mother, she was horrified. They did cavity searches, like for real. Then they put us all in the same clothes. The clanging shut of the doors was just an incredible experience. By the end of the weekend, when they debriefed us, we were holding on to one another. That's how realistic the experience was and how dehumanizing it was. It was horrible.
Was it just women?
No, oh no, the boys were in the bottom tier. And they were in cells. There were more boys who did it, so they got to sit. They were in the cells next to each other so they could pass notes and things like that. We were every other cell. So they really, really kept us isolated. And of course, there was the toilet, and I mean, some of us did not use the toilet all weekend. It was just too degrading, But it was, I think that those experiences were, really incredible. Then in the third year, they started the clinical program at the University of Connecticut School of Law. And I had worked the summer between my second and third years at Arnold Markle's State's Attorney's Office in New Haven. And I drove down from Litchfield every day to work, and it was fascinating work. He was so smart, dedicated. We would kind of go at it a little bit, but I loved Arnold Markle. And then during the clinical semester, I worked at the Hartford State's Attorney's Office every day. So I got to go to work instead of going to school. It was great.
So you began this criminal law experience.
Yeah, I would, for the cases that were going to go to plea in the Superior Court, I would do a synopsis of the facts that could be proved, that were essential to proving the elements of the crime. And so I would, have a photocopy of the statute and the synopsis in the file prepared for either John LaBelle, George Stoughton, or Dick Banbury. Mr. LaBelle was a state's attorney. George Stoughton, who is now a judge trial referee, was the assistant, and then Dick was the third in line there. And I did a case with Dick, a trial where we actually investigated it, and I think at the end, just before the jury was picked, he decided that there wasn't enough evidence to convict this person. But I'm not positive. My recollection may fail me. But Judge Danahy was the judge, and I always, we had a great time. I followed Dick Banbury around like a puppy dog.
This was third year? Is that
third
right?
year, yeah, first semester of third year. Yeah, it was great. And law school cost $150 per semester in those days, and my parents gave me $125 a month to pay rent and to buy food and gas. Gas was, I would fill up this little Volkswagen Bug that I had. I have my check register from that time, and $2 for gas,
right.
And that would last all week. Yeah. So
those were the days.
Those were the days.
And obviously you decided to, upon graduating from law school, to take the bar exam in Connecticut.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. I mean, I knew that, Connecticut's a great state. I mean, you can go skiing, you can get to the beach, you can get to New York, you can get to Boston. Mm-hmm. I didn't have any compelling desire to go anywhere else. And I'm not entirely sure my parents would have been happy about that. I remember floating the idea about maybe taking a year off to ski bum, and they said, no way. I mean, this is what you're going to do.
Yeah.
And I guess it's because when my mother was finishing high school, her parents sat down just at the end of the Depression and said, come into the living room. And whereupon they declared that they had enrolled her at Central Connecticut. It was Teachers College then. She graduated from Teachers College in 1938, that she was going to be a teacher. She wanted to be a nurse, but they told her she was going to be a teacher, and she went to Teachers College. And that's what she did. So I think that my mother especially thought that, I would be told what I was going to do in the context of, going for it. But I could go for it in ways that were productive here. And I had all kinds of, the support system.
Yes.
There was no, I didn't have this compelling desire to leave. And I was perfectly happy doing what I was doing. I liked being in court, and being in court for a young lawyer who happened to be a woman was not an easy place to be.
So the experience during law school with the clinics got you some of that already, and I assume that helped you decide, hey, this is for me.
Yeah, I did get the bug. I still liked politics. But I also, the whole acting thing, the courtroom really is like a stage. And there's a certain pre-production part of it, and there's a drama. There is real-life drama to it. Even though it isn't like it is on TV, it's much more ponderous than that. But I think that that's appropriate. The law is supposed to be deliberative, and it's not supposed to be so reactive that you don't have a cohesive body of law that extends over time. But the fact that could happen. I think the other thing that led me to the criminal law was when I went to college, I was in the honors program at Manhattanville, and I loved my advanced placement biology teacher in high school, Perry Caverly. He was one of my favorite teachers. And I thought I would go to medical school. I already had this concept in my mind that I would, keep going to school. But I took college calculus at Manhattanville along with the other honors programs. Well, I got the first D of my life. And I was floored. I had never gotten a grade like that. But it might as well have been Greek. So anyway, I was kicked out of the honors program, but that's when I started taking philosophy courses. And my SATs had been pretty comparable. And so I kind of flipped to the verbal stuff, but maintained this abiding interest in science. And so how does that failure work? Well, that failure worked by being able to understand the forensic evidence that would be used in the murder cases I tried, in understanding and talking to people like Henry Lee, and developing bite mark testimony and things like that.
As a judge, hearing some of the testimony you've heard.
Yeah, and I was frustrated because I was always so much of a generalist. I was good at a lot of things.
Was there any particular woman attorney, as you decided to take the bar, that you were looking at or looking to in terms of either role model or inspiration?
Oh, Marilyn Seichter. She was. I'm trying to remember if she was a year ahead of me or 2 years, but she did not compromise. She wanted to be in the courtroom, and she made her own firm.
Yeah.
She was not going to be a law librarian. She was not going to be a trust and estates lawyer. She was not going to sit in the background. She was going to be out there. And I met her in law school, and she did a lot of work for Ella Grasso, who I had also done some work for and seconded her nomination when she ran, I think the second time, for the 6th Congressional District. So we had that in common as well. So here we have, we're growing up and we have, the first woman governor who was ever elected in her own right, who went to Mount Holyoke College, who was a brilliant woman and took no hostages. She was a great role model.
And Marilyn Seichter, of course, unfortunately,
has passed away.
Yes. Her practice was family.
It was, yeah. Yep.
You didn't have any inclination at that point to practice family law?
No, I didn't. I think that what I was kind of looking around to do was to find a spot where I would learn some more about the real life in the law, and then do some politics on the side and see where it took me. I mean, I needed to get a job, you know. I mean, that was 7 years. I think a year and a half into law school, I told my parents that they had paid enough, and it was time for me to get some student loans, that they had worked long and hard, and you know, I didn't think it was fair anymore for them to be paying for me. So I got some student loans, which of course I dutifully paid back because I was so grateful to get them. And so I had to pay those back, and I knew that, you know, when you finished your education, you went and got a job. So getting a job then became kind of interesting. I had a friend, Ed Lang, whose wife worked for Connecticut Public TV, and she interviewed Louis Rome, who was then, I think, majority leader of the state Senate. Although he may have been minority, he became majority when the houses, you know, the parties switched. But he said, she asked him, would you hire a woman for your law firm? And in response, he said, if I found a qualified woman, yes, I would. Because those were the days when the big Hartford firms, some of them wouldn't even interview a woman. There were firms in Hartford in 1972 that would not hire, or let alone, they wouldn't even interview a woman. So Ed called me up and said, you know, call this guy and try and get an interview. And well, of course, I did. I picked up the phone. Yeah. And I thought, what was there to lose? Yeah. Absolutely nothing. And when I think about the temerity, you know, of just picking up the phone and calling some big shot like that, you know, and Lou was great. Come in to see me, and so I did a resume, you know, and he was a Republican. And of course I had all these Democratic credentials. I had been on the platform committee a couple of times, and you know, I had been the Democratic chair of the Vote 18 constitutional amendment, which is how I met Gloria Schaefer, who was another one of my mentors. Should not fail to mention Gloria, because she was, you know, a wonderful force in Connecticut politics. But Lou hired me. He didn't hire me right away. I had one job before because they weren't ready to hire somebody. But I went to a firm in the Valley, and then they broke up, and I called him back and I said, I'm losing this job. The firm is kind of going in separate directions, and I was not asked to go with anybody. Is there any chance you need somebody? And 2 days later I was hired.
Were you the first woman attorney he had hired in that firm?
Yes, yeah.
And that was in 1972 or 73?
Yeah, I think it was 70. No, it was 72. It was very shortly after. I only had the other job for a very brief period of time.
And what did you do at that law firm?
Well, I did criminal, family, bankruptcy. I worked with one of the other lawyers, Justin Donnelly, doing discovery on civil cases. There was a guy in the firm then, Steve Reitman, who was a real character, a great guy. Mm-hmm. But I ended up doing all the misdemeanor criminal stuff. And I did some courtside trials. And I remember Lou saying to me one day that he had had a conversation with a client who was objecting to going to court with a girl. And he told him to go get another law firm. So they were very supportive. I flunked the bar the first time I took it. It was the first administration of the multi-state. It was one of the most awful things that, I mean, I had never flunked anything. I mean, other than getting that D in calculus in college. But I'd never flunked anything in my life. And here, this important credential that I needed. And I went to see Harry Nair, who was the chair of the Bar Examining Committee at the time, and he said to me, oh, well, you know, if you had just taken the essays like the last administration of the bar, you would have done just fine.
Right.
But, you know, unfortunately, this multi-state. So Lou, he was in partnership with Richie Case at that time. They kept me on. I took the course that was designed for the multi-state.
Oh, they hired you before you had heard about the bar?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It took longer than to hear,
Yeah.
as I recall. We didn't have as many computers then.
Yeah.
Anyway, but, and I remember the day I passed the bar, I mean, when I flunked the bar exam, of course, I called my mother with the bad news. She said, come home. And of course I did, so I could cry on her shoulder. And I got some calls from people who were wonderful, successful lawyers who had had the same experience and said, you will live through this. Let this be, and my mother said, let this be the very worst thing that ever happens to you in your life. And I said, that's for sure. And what was really, really significant that day was that as I was, home in the evening licking my wounds, it was the day during the Munich Olympics that the Israeli athletes were taken hostage and murdered. And so right away, all of a sudden, it was, this too shall pass.
Yes.
There are big, big events in life that touch people in ways that are too horrific to imagine, and your little sidelight, should just go by the board. And so I literally grieved for a few hours, and then got back to task and committed to the horror of having to take it a second time.
Which was worse, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, and you don't want to wish that on anybody.
And your firm was helpful in
Yes,
that?
supportive. As a matter of fact, I think that they paid for the course and gave me the time to take the course. They were very, very supportive. They were so good to me.
And during your time with Lou Rome's office, were there other women hired?
No, just as I was leaving, Monica Harper was hired.
Okay. And so how long did you work with Lou Rome?
I think I was there about 5.5 or 6 years. And there was an opening. Oh, I know. I applied. This is a funny story. I applied for this after the Peter Riley case, which everybody knows about. John Bianchi died very suddenly. He was the state's attorney in Litchfield, and he had a sudden heart attack and died. And he was a really lovely guy. When I was in practice with Lou's firm, I had a case, a felony criminal case in the Superior Court in Litchfield, and of course, John Bianchi had a daughter, Susan, who he, wanted to talk to me about. He wanted to know where I went to college and what I was doing and what have you, and how I got to where I was, because he had, he wanted to support his daughter and what she wanted to do. And so I had, several great chats with him, and I was very fond of him. Of course, the Riley case touched lives in a very negative way. And a lot of people had bad things happen to them after that case. But in any event, I'm sure that, that will be, or has been forgotten, even in legal circles. But in any event, when John Bianchi died, the state's attorneys were hired and appointed by the judges of the Superior Court in those days.
And this is in the late 70s? Is that about where we are?
Yeah, 76. I think he died in 75 or 6.
Okay.
It might have been a little bit earlier. But in any event, I was not out of law school that long. I applied for the job of state's attorney. And I'm trying to remember, I think it was Judge Sponzo and Justice Speziale who did the interviewing. And I can't remember who else might have been in attendance that day. I don't remember. But Justice Speziale, and he was Judge Speziale then, asked me, didn't I think I was a bit young for the job? I mean, he would never have, been concerned about the gender issue, I don't think, although I'm sure that was in the back of everybody's mind because of working with a primarily male law enforcement community. And also I very blithely said, well, that's what everybody said about John Kennedy when he was elected president. And so John Speziale often repeated that story to people because he got such a kick out of it. I was not hired, but there was a period of time in Litchfield when we had about 11 homicides in a row, and they decided that it was time to hire an assistant state's attorney. And so Judge Speziale, I think I saw him at the Torrington Country Club where my dad played.
Because that's where he was in your kind of, your area of where you live.
Yes,
where
yeah,
you were
he was
yeah.
from Torrington, and,
Yeah.
and so I would run into him, periodically during the summer. And my mother had taught his son John to read at the Sarka School. So there was that little connection as well. All these, kind of concentric circles that sometimes bump into one another. But, so I applied for that job, and I was hired on a part-time basis. And Lou Rome let me do that. He let me manage a congressional campaign, too, to take time off from work, for Toby Moffett, who had been the head of the Connecticut Citizens Action Corps.
Yep.
And was very critical of Lou Rome's record. And of course, Richie couldn't believe that I would go to work for him because he had been so mean to Lou. But Lou thought it would be a good thing for me to do, and I did. But in any event, that made me, I think, a better lawyer. So I was able to do part-time work. So I did the Board of Pardons, which was in Hartford or at the jail, up at Summers. I did a federal court habeas stuff because I was already in Hartford. And I met a lot of, very significant members of the Connecticut Defense Bar as I did that. Of course, there were other ways, when I was practicing in Hartford, I got to know a lot of people, Mac Buckley, Hubie Santos, Jim Wade, and the people who were in court trying cases. I knew them. And when I became a full-time prosecutor, I tried cases against them.
But this was when you were working with Lou Rome.
When I was working with Lou, I got into the federal courts, and it was really a very interesting time. So I was doing a smattering of everything, and developing some interest on the family side of the court. I did family cases with Lou, who was always very interested in exploring with people, whether or not divorce was the only option for them. Very mindful of, children and what happens to children. So that was stuff that I was hearing, from the beginning of my time as a lawyer. Very interesting.
So he
stuff.
really, based on what you're telling me so far, he was a major influence in your early career.
Yeah. Major influence and a major support. Even as I was going to be a judge, he was a major support.
Anyone else before your changing career slightly into your prosecutor days, anyone else that you look back and say he or she was a major force in my...
Well, it's awful because you are supported by so many people and impacted by so many people that I feel like, oh dear, I would leave somebody out.
Okay.
There are...
I don't want to put you
in
that position. Yeah. So by the mid to late 70s, you were looking really into the criminal area as where you wanted to be.
Well, because to get in the courtroom, I had to get into the public sector. And what was it that I wanted to do that I was very interested in, and that was criminal work. I loved it. But it's very interesting because it had so many different facets.
In terms of women lawyers, are you saying that there were certain areas of litigation that weren't open?
No, there were virtually no women litigators. The women were, if they got to be second chair, they were lucky. People weren't hiring women as lawyers during that period of time to be in litigation. It just wasn't done, and it was through the public sector that some of those doors were opened. I mean, I remember being in short calendar in Hartford one day, and I think that it was in the North courtroom on the 3rd floor. And we were, I was in the jury box with a bunch of other lawyers, and we were all, chatting and laughing and having a good time. And I think I was seated next to Pat Dwyer from Glastonbury, and we were just, waiting for the judge to come out. And so the judge would come out and call the list.
Right.
There was no phone-in system then.
Right.
It was a great way to chat with your friends and to see everybody and compare notes and what have you. And the judge would read the cases, and then people would say, ready, ready, things like that. And when it got to my case, I did what everybody else did in the jury box. I said, ready, Your Honor. I did not get up. Judge stopped dead and said, young lady, did you just mark that case ready? And I got up on my feet and I said, yes, I did, Your Honor. And he said, the next time you address this court, you get on your feet. Well, none of the guys got on their feet. I could feel the hairs of my back. I was so angry. Well, I went right back to the office and I slammed Lou's door and started screaming at him. Do you know what this judge did to me? He called me on the carpet for blah, blah, blah. Well, it turned out that years later, that judge apologized to me because he realized afterwards, because everyone in the courtroom went, oh, and then when people marked their cases ready, they started getting up. And the men got up, and then he realized what he was doing.
Yeah.
So, very interesting.
Yes.
That's the kind of stuff that happened.
Well, we're going to, I think, take a short break at this point, Anne, and then carry on in a few minutes.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, we're back, and I'm interviewing Judge Anne Dranginis, and I think, Anne, the last thing we were talking about before our short break was your first job with Lou Rome and the experiences you got there, but I know that you didn't end up having your entire legal career there, so perhaps you could tell us what you did after that.
Well, when in 1977, after I was appointed a part-time assistant state's attorney, I went full-time in May of 1978. It was a rather unique situation at the time. It was prior to the court merger, so that there had not been a woman doing major felony prosecution in the Superior Court before. And while Mary Galvin was appointed shortly thereafter to do the same job in Arnold Markel's office, I was the first, and I think it was a time for me to really be in the courtroom. I felt that I needed to be in the public sector so that I could get that kind of trial experience. It just was not done. Women were not in the courtroom trying cases. Particularly not jury cases. And to do that and to have that experience, I thought I needed to be in the public sector.
And that's because the private sector, the civil personal injury cases, commercial litigation, weren't providing the opportunities, weren't opening the way for women
That's
litigators.
Right. Yes. There was a resistance still to women doing these kinds of jobs. And I think that one of the reasons I was drawn to prosecution, the summer I spent with Arnold Markel, I had done some research with his help on the history of the office of the state's attorney, and it has a very proud history from 1685 when there were the king's attorneys, or the queen's attorneys as they might have been in the colonial period. But there was a strong tradition of doing what was right. It was not about just winning cases, but it was about being convinced that you could prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt, and the crime that you were prosecuting and the person that you were bringing before the court was the right person. So it was kind of this schizophrenic, here we have to, punish the right person for the crime, but if the evidence was not there, we had a concomitant duty to not go forward. And there are wonderful histories of cases where prosecutors did not pursue, where state's attorneys did not pursue even very serious charges because they did not believe that they had competent evidence that would meet that standard of proof. So I took that role very seriously, and I also thought it would be a way for me to make a contribution in a way that was powerful. There was a great deal of, and there remains a great deal of discretion in the office, what charges to bring and how to dispose of a case. So I thought that that history brought to me a reason to understand that law could elevate people. And I have persisted in that belief that if you speak to someone who has made an error in judgment, or someone who has, done a very bad thing, and if you speak to the best part of that person and respect them for their better part, even if you're sentencing them for a long time, it's still respecting them as people. So I loved the idea. Also, my interest in science was something that was brought to bear, and I think I may have said that or implied that there were some things that happened after the Peter Riley case that created some difficulties for people. But one of the things that it did do was that it professionalized the evidence gathering and preservation piece in the Connecticut State Police. They got a good lab. They got the training that they needed to search crime scenes in an appropriate way. So that when I was in the state's attorney's office, I got to try a lot of great cases. And the first case that I tried actually two cases that I lost. Upon reflection, one was a manslaughter case, and Jack Zeldis from Bridgeport was the defense lawyer. And I used an expression to describe his client that he turned around and used to benefit his claim of self-defense. And the defendant was found not guilty. And Zeldis said to me, "You really had me on the ropes. I really thought he was going to be convicted." But that was a very interesting piece. So I was very careful about my own characterizations of people afterwards, particularly in cases of self-defense. The other case was a rape case where our new public defender and my dear friend for many years, Charlie Gill, who is now a senior judge of the Superior Court, he came up from New Haven and became the public defender shortly after I was in Litchfield. And he was defending one of two guys tried together on a rape case. And because of his New Haven connections, he knew about this new fellow at the University of New Haven, Henry Lee, who was a serologist, and he, analyzed, bodily substances, including seminal stains. And so he brought Henry Lee in on the defense. The claim of this rape case was that this young woman was taken by two fellows into a secluded area in Torrington in a car, and that they had taken her panties and thrown the panties out the window. And Henry Lee analyzed them and found evidence of other involvements. And so these two fellows were acquitted. And
And based on that, you felt that that testimony was the end of your case, pretty much?
Well, no, we tried it to conclusion because I argued to the jury that that didn't change the facts of that night. But it was the beginning of how people were starting to look at scientific evidence in a different way, and it's made a huge impact in how these cases are tried. And of course, now we have TV shows about them every night of the week.
That's right.
But I did say to our county detective at the time, I said, I don't want to try another case without this guy on my side. So the next case I tried was Asherman, and that was the case of the two Columbia Medical School students who came up to New Hartford, to Jones Mountain, to relax after their exams. And the next morning, one of them came down to the uncle of the victim and said that they had been attacked by two hunters in the woods. And when they found Michael Aronow, the nephew of Mr. Jones, he was on this promontory by Route 40, overlooking Route 44 in New Hartford with all the lights, and he had a wound on his neck that practically it practically took his head off, and then 126 stab wounds on his back, bite marks.
Human bite marks?
Human bite marks, yeah. It was a very interesting case. That case had happened before we knew about Henry Lee. All of the physical evidence in that case had been analyzed by the FBI lab.
Okay.
And there was a portion of the trial which lasted 13 weeks, where the fellow from the FBI lab came up, and I actually asked him, he had to, identify the blue jeans that he had analyzed for the chain of custody.
And he's on the stand.
And he's on the witness stand, and so I plunked this wrapped up brown paper, couldn't put anything in plastic, it deteriorated the substances, so it was in brown paper. And I said to him, well, then what do you do when we unwrap? We receive it, we mark it, we unwrap it. I said, and then what do you do? And he said, well, we do a visual inspection of this. And I said, okay, and well, how would you do a visual inspection? And in Litchfield, there's the witness stand, and the jury box is right next to it, as you know. So he took these blue jeans on the table at the witness stand, and he spread them out, and the jury is looking, and he said, and of course they're blue jeans, and denim is dark on the outside, so we usually look at it from the inside, where it's lighter. And for some reason that I could never explain to anyone, I said, oh, well, then how do you do that? And he said, well, we turn them inside out. And I said, well, why don't you do that for the jury? And he stuck his hand in the leg of the trousers and pulled, and both legs had these stains, red stains, as if the person wearing the jeans was kneeling in blood. There was an audible gasp from the jury. The only other audible gasp in that case was when Rick Albrecht, the defense lawyer who had come from the Manhattan DA's office, rested the defense case without putting Stephen Asherman on the witness stand. So the defendant did not testify, which of course is his right. But I think that under the circumstances, the jury was expecting him to. And it was a fascinating case. We had all kinds of post-verdict motions. And after the verdict, Max Hyman, who became a judge and then a judge of the appellate court, and who has sadly left us, but he was there for the sentencing, and the post-verdict motions are all kinds of allegations of jury misconduct. They snuck in clothes to do experiments in the jury room under apples. Our security is better in Litchfield now, don't you?
I guess. So this is an off-cited case, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It
was it affirmed on appeal?
Or? It was affirmed on appeal. But we had tracking dogs in that. Clem, the state police bloodhound trained by Andy Rebman, he testified. Because Andy got on the witness stand and said what Clem had done. And there was a kind of a flurry of activity about that as well. But I went out onto the mountain for 2 days and repeated that track with this guy from Arizona, Frank McDonald, a former Chief Justice McDonald, when he was state's attorney in Waterbury. He hired him to analyze the knots that were around the hands of the 9 victims in State versus Aquin.
Right.
So he investigated that, then came up to Jones Mountain to help me prepare for this case. It was a really lovely family that had this terribly public event happen. And at lunch, when Bernie Lawrence was there, they asked whether or not they could hire a prosecutor.
And you and Bernie were there at the victim's family?
At the victim's family. We had been, and it was raining, it was awful out. But,
and what did you say?
And I said that it was not possible for them to do that it wasn't our practice or policy, that this case, while their nephew and their son, it was Dr. Aronow who asked this question of me, while he was the victim, the case was really, the case belonged to the state of Connecticut, and the state of Connecticut appointed its prosecutors, and that I would be trying the case. So when Bernie Lawrence and I got back into my then old Toyota Land Cruiser, leaving the property, he kind of gave me a little pat on the back. Said, "Nice job, you know, you let them, he said, you let them down so nicely."
Yeah.
But, you know, it was a hard thing. I mean, here they are seeing this kind of disheveled young woman who's walking around in the woods with a tracker from Arizona, and they probably were thinking, oh, we need to get a real lawyer, a suit, you know, to try this case, and, you know, let us do that. So that was interesting. We also had a skirmish in that case because Elliot Gross was the medical examiner in Connecticut, and when he photographed the bite marks during autopsy, he did not put a ruler or anything next to it so that it could be sized. Because we did get the dentition, that is Mr. Asherman had to come up to the dental school at UConn and provide impressions of his teeth so that they could be analyzed. And during the trial, all the forensic odontologists who testified for the prosecution in Florida against Ted Bundy, the serial killer, got on a plane and came up to Connecticut to testify for the defense. And I had this guy, Erwin Sofer, who was the chief medical examiner and a forensic odontologist from the state of West Virginia. And because I didn't disclose him, I could only use him in rebuttal. So he took some overlays, photographic overlays of Michael, I keep saying Michael, it was Michael Aronow who was the victim, Stephen Asherman's impressions and the bite mark, and they were saying that it didn't match. And I was able to call Erwin Sofer as a rebuttal witness, even though I couldn't use him in my case in chief. And he said, well, these, I know what the expert said, but the expert doesn't have the midline of the teeth aligned correctly. He said, this is the correct alignment. And he took these transparencies and he said, this is the midline, and he moved it, and of course it fit. The jurors, after all the post-verdict motions about jury misconduct and everything, the jurors were outside the courthouse, and they said, I suppose we can talk to you now. And I said, yeah. I said, what did you think about all the bite mark evidence? And they said, we took all that stuff in the boxes and we put it aside. So, you know, sometimes I think that lawyers think things are important in cases and other things are even more important. But it was a fascinating case. It went on forever. And he got 7 to 14 years. He actually did his time, and he was so bright. It was such a sad case. I think that he redid the computer system for the Department of Corrections.
Oh.
I mean, he did not waste a lot of time, but he, of course, could not go back. There were gaps in his records. When probation did the pre-sentence report, he wouldn't disclose what he had done during a certain 3-year period of time. So I don't know exactly what was going on, and there was some belief that it was drug-related, but there was never any competent evidence.
You didn't argue motive, or you didn't argue motive,
No.
I take it, because you didn't know.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
We had our suspicions, but...
You talked briefly about the victim's reaction to your trying this case. Did you have any resistance to getting such cases from your state's attorney?
No, Dennis Santor was the state's attorney. He was more than happy to let me try cases. I mean, we prepared them together. We talked about them. He tried the rape cases. I would prepare the victim. He would try the case. I thought it was significant for a male person to be presenting a case like that. So we split things up in a variety of ways. There was a period of time where he had some difficulty, and a substitute state's attorney came in, and I had to kind of assert myself. And of course, the guys in the major crime squad were not used to working with a woman.
Well, were you unusual as the state's attorney, assistant state's attorney at that point in trying cases? Did you look around the state and say, hey, I'm trying cases, but so-and-so isn't, or?
Absolutely, and I think that, Dennis Santor really allowed me to do a lot of things. He didn't always go to the chief state's attorney's meetings, and I would go.
Okay.
I mean, I had that sense that if I was going to have this job, I was going to make the most of it, and so we did that. I tried State versus Stepney with Attorney James Wade from Hartford, an excellent trial lawyer, and that was another long case. A woman by the name of Barbara Makaitis was murdered in her home. Her paper boy discovered her body by, she wasn't coming out to get the paper, which she usually did, I guess. And he had knocked on the door, and so he went around and he looked in the window and he saw her body and called his father, who called the police. And he was the first child witness that I ever actually put on a witness stand. And he led off the case, and he did a good job. But, it was a short bit of evidence, and it wasn't about him, it was about his observations. But that case was interesting, and I became pretty close to the children and the sisters of Barbara Makaitis, and did a lot of work with victims. I had the experience of knowing how families were traumatized by these kinds of events. But after, as a kind of a comical aside, to these cases, we kind of always look for,
humor where we can.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of humor in what we do, and everything is, people come to court when they're really in trouble, or, part of the worst times. So to have some levity, it's always good to share stories. And Jim Wade told me after the case was well over that Tim McNamara, who was another great trial lawyer in Hartford, had said to him, well, it was bad enough that he lost the case, but he got beaten by a girl. So that was pretty good. But I do think that probably the most significant case that I handled when I was a state's attorney was State versus Buck Thurman. Tracy Thurman there was a movie made about the case. There was, a lot done with the whole issue of family violence as a result.
And there was a civil action brought.
There was, after the criminal case, there was a civil, and I told Tracy she should get a lawyer. It was after the second police officer, first police officer stopped after he got the call to use the facility before he went to the crime scene. The second police officer was on the witness stand, and I asked him if he could identify the defendant. And, in the courtroom, we sit in the prosecutor's table and the defense table, and he picked out somebody. He looked around the room and then picked out a member of the jury. And of course, I, looked at Judge Pickett and said, may I have a recess, please, Your Honor? And so I got back into the office and called him every bad word I had ever learned in Catholic Women's College.
Yeah.
But that case, I'd been to the crime scene there as well. We went to the crime scene frequently. And there wasn't, Tracy Thurman had already been taken to the hospital, and I think transferred probably to Hartford Hospital right away because of the seriousness of her injuries. That was just such a tragic case. Buck Thurman was holding their baby and saying, "Watch mommy die," as he stomped on her head and caused her paralyzing injuries. And she was she was a very strong woman. Mm-hmm. She, really improved, and when she was ready to testify, she testified. In the Litchfield upstairs courtroom in our old courthouse, where the state's attorneys have an office, there's a door. You walk toward the jury box, then jog around the jury box, and then into the witness stand. And when I stood up and called her as my witness, she slowly and painfully made her way on her own to the witness stand, and it seemed interminable. Mm-hmm. And the jury got to see how difficult her movements were. And I took her through that, their marriage, the abuse, the restraining order, the fact that he came, the fact that she called the police, then that he had, struck her and what have you, and went through the elements of the crime. And then at the end of her testimony, which was not all that long as I recall, I said to her, "Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury the kinds of things that you can't do now because of your injuries?" And she just kind of sadly looked over to them and said, starting to cry, "I can't even pick up my little boy." And at that moment I realized that I should sit down and shut up, because the moment was so powerful. It was a really, really interesting case. I was pregnant during that case. And
very pregnant?
Very pregnant. And, well, yeah, I was very pregnant. And it was also televised on local Cablevision 5. I think it was the first trial in Connecticut that really had gavel-to-gavel coverage, too. And Judge Pickett allowed that, and I certainly was game. And I told everybody that even though the camera added 15 pounds, I didn't have to worry because I had a legitimate excuse. I was pregnant, So anyway, because it was televised, we would review the evidence. We would review the testimony, either for cross-examination or to get ready for the next day. And so that Friday afternoon, Dr. Jim Marikangis had testified for the defense, and I had, what was his name? Ezra Griffith, I think, from Yale, was going to be the rebuttal psychiatrist. So I went back home that afternoon to watch Dr. Marikangis' testimony, to take notes. I'd already taken notes while I was in the courtroom, but I wanted to do it again. So I was at home with my feet up and everything, and the inspector was there, and we were both talking about the testimony and what have you. And that Sunday morning, I went into labor about 3 o'clock in the morning. And it was funny because I had these trial notes. I had a notebook with my trial notes, and I would use them, to prepare for final argument. And I saved the page, I still have it, where it has the date, and it says, "Annie has baby!" exclamation mark, DAS for Dennis A. Santor, continues. Okay.
I was going to say, you didn't try to get a recess and go back to
No, they finished the case, but it was funny because Gene Riccio was defending Buck Thurman, and he and the secretary in the public defender's office sent me flowers, and the card said objection. And so, and I remember Judge Pickett telling me afterwards that he had to explain to the jury that I wasn't back, that even though I was referred to as Miss or Ms. Dranginis, that I was indeed married.
Oh, jeez.
And that I had had my baby. And she was born, Charlotte was born 5.5 weeks early. So it was a little touch and go, yeah. But in any event, I missed the end of the case.
And I take it the end of the case went
yes, he was convicted, yeah. And, but it was an interesting period of my life when I was trying a case of, I think, State versus Vinal and State versus Avis together. where I told Judge Pickett he was going to be reversed, and he was, because they shouldn't have been tried together. I had, and that was in, I think, 81, and I had been married. My marriage was not successful, but, you know, I did have 2 beautiful girls.
Yes.
And I went to judicial selection for the first time before I had Charlotte.
Oh.
And they asked me whether or not I thought I had enough life experience to be a judge. And I looked at them and I said, well, I've traveled to Europe several times. I go to the theater. I have great friends. I work hard. I said, I don't really know, what do you mean life experience? I had no, well, it was just like a buzzword. Mm-hmm. And of course I got turned down. I mean, it is not unknown that women are turned down by judicial selection, even as we speak.
And how, and you were young.
Oh, right, well, that too, yeah.
I mean, that used to be an
Right, I
issue,
was
like,
about 35 then,
Yeah,
I think.
yeah.
And, yeah, because the next year I had Charlotte, and because I had her when I was 36,
Yeah.
Being an elderly prima gravida. Then I went to judicial selection again, was approved, and I didn't try any more cases. I hadn't done anything other than routine matters.
Mm-hmm. Still in Litchfield, State's
Attorney's Office. And I went back to judicial selection. I was approved for judicial selection. And that was in the days when they had the bar committee and then the governor's ad hoc committee.
Yeah, that was before.
It was prior to the Judicial Selection Commission. And I remember Marilyn Seichter was on the Judicial Selection Commission, or not, excuse me, on the ad hoc committee, the governor's ad hoc committee. And when I went the second time, I had in my car, waiting outside, a social worker from DCF and a young woman who had been sexually abused by her adopted father, and the adoptive parents then terminated or wanted to reverse the adoption and give her back. So this child had not only been sexually abused in that situation, but then suffered the loss of the expectancy of parents. And so I was a little edgy, I guess. But anyway, because Marilyn Seichter told me later they thought that maybe I was too tough. And she said, yeah, she's tough, all right. And you don't mind using that word when it pertains to a man. But why is it a pejorative when it's used about a woman? And I had said to them, I apologize, because I said, it's really a very difficult day for me. I saw this young woman victimized, and she's being victimized again today because I'm taking her back to the group home. You know, I just was, you know, floored by the whole thing that happened. But anyway, one person on the ad hoc committee had mentioned that he was surprised that I had gone to Manhattanville. My spelling was not perfect. And I said, well, perhaps it was a typo. I typed that myself, you know. I made up some excuse. But those were the kind of things that nitpicking, you know.
Yeah.
And you couldn't be tough. You couldn't. I guess people didn't use the word assertive in that context. But it's always assumed that if you're going to be a judge, you have to manage a courtroom and you have to be tough. You can't, you know. So that was very
successful,
difficult.
though, right?
But that was successful, and then I was appointed to the bench, and the day that I was confirmed by the state senate for the judgeship in 1985, I found out I was pregnant with Sarah.
Your second daughter.
My second daughter.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, I wonder if I should tell somebody, you know? But I didn't. I thought, well, they'll have to deal with it. And Catherine Emmett actually was the first sitting Superior Court judge who had a baby. And she beat me by 6 months. And she didn't stay on the bench that long and has since, you know, gone on to her wonderful practice in Stamford. So I had Sarah as a judge. And so I had one when I was a state's attorney and one when I was a judge.
And Charlotte was how old when you took the bench?
I was sworn in on her first birthday.
So you had not even a toddler,
Right,
And you
19, they were
pregnant.
19 months apart, yeah.
Yeah. So,
It was made for a
what was
very
that
exciting
like?
life.
I mean, being
Well-
a judge and,
Well, it was very interesting because I think that being employed that way in the public sector and having a set schedule really was good for parenting. I mean, I think that it would be very difficult to be in that kind of dog-eat-dog, rainmaker, kind of business, raising small children. And I was divorced when they were, I don't know, like 4, separated when they were 5 and 3.5. They were very young. So, and I had great family support, in that endeavor. And I couldn't have done it without my parents, clearly. But
where were you living at that point?
in Litchfield. Yeah, I had established, it was great. I mean, I traveled around and my first assignment was at GA 14 so there I was pregnant. My obstetrician gynecologist couldn't believe it. I was at GA 14 in the old Morgan Street building, no air conditioning. In the summer at the juncture of 91 and 84 with all the fumes. And I remember going in, the courts were colored. There was green court, which was the traffic court. The red court was the arraignment court. And yellow court was the trial court. And there was blue court, which was pretrial, I think. But I remember being assigned, Judge Mack, who was currently the chief administrative judge for juvenile, was the presiding judge at GA 14. Judge Harry Jackaway was there. He was a wonderful man. I loved Harry.
Yeah.
And we started out with Arnie Aronson, and then Jonathan Kaplan came. But of course, I'm pregnant. So I'm like, we were going to the Marble Pillar and eating hash or macaroni and cheese and all this. And I would be making the reservations and dragging them along.
Yeah.
And they were all complaining because I legitimately was gaining a little bit of weight, but they could not withstand anymore, So we had a lot of fun. But I remember Judge Mack assigned me to the arraignment court at one point. And in arraignment court, you walked into the lockup to advise. And it was this big, dark, smelly place. It was just horrible. And there was a big sheriff there by the name of Steve Reed. And at one point, I walked into the lockup, and I felt this tug on the back of my robe, and I literally came off the ground, and I was pulled back, and the sheriff said to me, "You went in too far, Your Honor." But it was like I was levitated,
They don't
so
do
that was
that anymore.
No, that was a great place to work, though. It was, a really good assignment. Then I did in those days, we changed in September and April or something. I mean, there was this weird time. And then they went to, when do we switch now? September?
September.
September, on a yearly basis, but we changed twice or
Yeah,
something.
that's what I thought.
But at some point, we had to do an 8-month term in one court, and I was at Hartford Family doing contested custody cases.
When you had your baby?
When I was pregnant with Sarah.
Okay.
And I was, and it was at 75 Elm Street, where we're going to have our new appellate
Right.
court building, so
Right.
it's, it's like full circle. And so I was there, and the big chair that I was in, and I leaned back and it fell over.
Oh my God.
And I was on the phone with my then husband, and I dropped the phone, and I was between the wall and the desk, and the chair just went back, so I was on the ground with my feet up with this big belly in front of me. I mean, I couldn't move. I was right at the end of the pregnancy, and they were begging me to go home and stay home. And he's on the phone. I can hear him saying, "Are you all right? Because there was this crash, And I was hysterical laughing because I couldn't get up. But so finally, Judge Frank Hennessy, who was the deputy chief court administrator at the time, said, "Annie, you've hit your due date. We don't want you back at work."
Right.
I said, "Well, I'm going to the hospital in Hartford. It would actually be more convenient for me to, if I go into labor." So anyway, I had Sarah, and then I took 3 months off for each child.
Both at the state's attorney's office and as a judge?
As a judge. And I thought that would be about the maximum. And I was really, because of new business that, my ex-husband was doing, I was really, the major support of the family. So it wasn't a question of if I should go back to work, it was just a question of when. And I thought that that was a legitimate period of time to take off. And so I went from taking the maternity leave to going back to work full-time.
You didn't do part-time at all? Was
no
that an
part-time.
option?
No,
at that point?
there was no policy about it.
Because Judge Emmett hadn't.
She did some part-time work. She did it differently. And I thought that it was so hard to do something part-time as a judge.
Yeah.
You either had a docket or you didn't. And I was new enough to the bench not to want to create any problems. I think that, the Wall Street Journal had an ad once, even the fast track has a passing lane. And when people talk about a mommy track, I'm not so sure that I think that there is such a thing. Mm-hmm. There might be, I don't know how, people do what they have to do to get through life and to provide for their families. And I made a decision that since I had to go back to work, I might as well just, launch into it. And, I had a variety of people coming into the house. At least I could do that. I didn't have to take the kids.
And you did have your family, your sister and your parents.
Yeah, my parents, yeah. I think my sister was still teaching then, so, but my parents were there every day. And I had babysitters that came into the house. Mm-hmm. So I didn't have to, I had to get myself ready in the morning to go out, so I didn't have to get kids ready and myself and then drop them off somewhere, which a lot of working parents have to do that, and I think that that would be very, very difficult.
Do you feel as though the experience of having your children either as a judge or having them be small children as a judge affected your experience as a judge? Did you have more difficulty in terms of the length of the day, the types of cases? Any way you would say that it affected your judicial?
No, I mean, I did, I thought, it's very, the job of parenting children is extraordinarily difficult. So, doing my job, my day job,
yeah,
was something that I enjoyed, and I got so much from it, and it was a good job to have with having the responsibilities of the children, and I was well paid. Yeah. And so I can't contemplate doing it any differently, because I don't think once you do something, you can't go back and say, gee, I wish I had done this or done that. You do the best you can at the time. There are periods of time where I think if I had had more time at home when they were in their budding adolescence, it would have been better. When I did a variety of assignments on the bench, but in 1994, when I became Chief Administrative Judge of the Family Division, mm-hmm. I was out doing meetings and doing a lot of stuff that was in addition to my court day.
Evening meetings.
Evening meetings, yeah. And that took away from the kids in some respects. And I'm not entirely sure that, as I look at it now, I might have elected not to be quite so involved in my career as a judge.
Was there any?
But they're both pretty competent and pretty independent people.
Yeah.
So.
Well, knowing both of the young women, I can't say that you've done a bad job at all.
We're keeping our fingers crossed. Yeah. That's all you can do.
But was there any flexibility in terms of your assignments from the administration if you needed?
I think that consistently, judicial administration for all judges have tried to accommodate whether people are taking care of elderly parents or whether they're taking care of kids or whether there's a particular, sport where it's important for the parent to be there and to attend. The importance that judicial administration puts on family, I think, is very supportive mm-hmm. of that and of judges who are doing both. And we have a lot of judges of both genders who are taking care of kids.
Yeah.
I think that my belief was, as a woman, that I didn't want to be criticized for taking advantage. I was very, very aware that that could be a criticism that could be used against me. I remember when I got to Litchfield, ultimately, I went from, let's see, I did GA 14, I did the Hartford family, I went to Waterbury and sat in Part A criminal. Then I got back to Litchfield and I did the GA, the contempt docket on the family side, and the juvenile court was part of the GA assignment then. Juvenile court was only 2 days a month in Litchfield, it's now 5 days a week.
Yeah.
So that shows a huge change. But I was, throughout all of that, I was able to stay close enough. I mean, Hartford to Litchfield's about 50 minutes, door to door, getting in the building, and it's an hour. But Waterbury was 20 minutes for me. And then when I was in Litchfield...
It's 40 minutes for everyone else.
Yeah, right?
It's 20 minutes for you.
Yeah, right, that's right. Oh, dear, we shouldn't talk about those things. But in any event, I learned from the best, When I was in Litchfield, a friend said that his wife had been talking to somebody who was on jury duty, and they said that I got to work late. And I said, oh, isn't that interesting? Because I dropped the kids off at the Litchfield Center School at 8:30, and then I go right to the courthouse, so I'm in by 8:35. And so I thought, well, this is easy. So I put my robe on and walked downstairs and said good morning to everybody I saw, so that, because I came in the back door, went up the back stairs to the chambers, people thought that I wasn't there. So that perception, thank God I learned of that perception because I was able to dispel it. But those are the kinds of things that people talk about, and I think that as judges it's very important that people know the role, that we're working even when we don't have our robe on and we're not on the bench. And that is kind of a mysterious thing, I think, to people. And that was always very important to me.
So you were in Litchfield. Did you stay in Litchfield as administrative judge, or did you go somewhere before then? I know you were administrative judge for several years before your...
Right, I'm trying to remember. I was there, I think in 1990, I was made administrative judge.
Okay.
And I went on the bench in 85. So I came back to Litchfield and I went from Hartford to Waterbury to Litchfield, and then became administrative judge in Litchfield. And I was administrative judge in Litchfield. I had some really wonderful cases. When I was in Litchfield, it's so hard to keep track of the time. When you did what. But I got a call one day from Hartford asking me to go to Danbury to hear a case because all of the Danbury judges had been recused for one reason or another. And the name of the case was McConnell versus Beverly Enterprises, and it was Connecticut's so-called right to die case. Mrs. McConnell had been an emergency room at Danbury Hospital, and she suffered a traumatic brain injury in a car accident on the way to work one day, and she was in a persistent vegetative state. And at one point, she had been moved from the regular hospital to an intermediate hospital, and then into this extended care facility, and she was atrophied, and she was not communicating at all with the outside world. Her family finally came into court to ask that her feeding tube be taken away. It's a very, very hard case. It was very sad. The Attorney General was in the case. There was a guardian ad litem appointed for her. An attorney represented her interest in life. And there was a statute about, not withholding food and hydration. And yet the family said that she was so informed about life-sustaining techniques. She talked to her son about not having a motorcycle, or if he had to have a motorcycle, at least wearing a helmet because of traumatic brain injury, about people that are comatose. And she was very aware, had stated several times in her life that she did not want to be kept alive on life-sustaining technologies of any kind. So, I went in and heard the sad, sad evidence, and her husband could barely bring himself to come into the courthouse to testify that he agreed with his children's decision that she should not exist like this any longer. So I'm in the Danbury court.
Is this a jury case or a
No, courtside.
So you're the fact
courtside. So
finder.
I'm the fact finder, and
Yeah.
it was a lot of responsibility. So in the back of the courtroom, there is a Roman collar walking around, and I thought, I called my mother. What did I do? I called my mother.
I'm getting a theme here.
Yeah. And I said, oh my God, they're going to excommunicate me, you know? And I said, and she said, well, don't be ridiculous. You know, of course, you know, just hear the case. You know what to do. And because when I tried State versus Asherman as a state's attorney, my father came every day and took notes for me. And I got to tell you, I used his notes in my final argument.
He was retired at that point.
Yeah, he was retired, and he
Yeah,
became a
yeah.
courthouse. You know, he would come and watch me, and it was great because he was so proud. You know.
Yeah.
But anyway, so back to McConnell. There was this fellow walking back and forth, and I'm thinking, oh dear. It turned out to be Father John Paris, who taught at Holy Cross in Boston College, and he is an eminent bioethical researcher, writer, teacher. And he got up on the witness stand and talked about Aquinas, all the things that I had learned being a philosophy major at Manhattanville College. And I sat there, and it was like, here I am, you know, hearing all this great stuff that I heard before. And he said that it was like the tree, the large oak that had fallen in a storm, and the farmer propped it up, and the tree did not survive. And so he said, the removal of the prop does not cause the death. It was the injury to the tree in the storm. And he said the Judeo-Christian teaching was such that one was not required to take a medical treatment that one did not want or could not afford, and that if a person made their wishes known, they had the right to have that honored. So I wrote about a 44-page written opinion, and I decided it on constitutional grounds, on personal autonomy grounds. And when it got to the Supreme Court, Chief Justice Peters wrote the opinion on state statutory grounds. Now, all the interest groups were looking for this case because the facts were so strong, because she really knew what she was talking about, this woman. They wanted that case to go to the United States Supreme Court instead of the Missouri case, the name of which, Cruzan. But I was affirmed, at least. That was the good news. And in a law journal article written about end-of-life and right-to-die cases, it pointed to Connecticut's case as one in both the trial court and in the appellate court as not being gender biased, which I thought was fascinating.
Wow.
Well, because if it was a woman expressing a desire not to be kept alive, that was regarded differently as the man who asserts that he does not. And the article went right down through all the states that had had these kinds of cases. So I guess that was kind of a victory for Chief Justice Peters, and in some respects for me.
Well, Anne, before we move on to your final career shift to date, is there anything else you want to talk about in terms of your experiences, your life as a trial judge? Because you briefly mentioned you
I mean, I think that I had the
judge.
opportunity as the chief family judge. I was given the obligation of rewriting the family rules and having some automatic orders, and it was not a pleasant experience to go through because there was a lot of resistance. There is always resistance to change, and it was, but I think that it elevated the practice, the family practice in the state of Connecticut, which I think is a very important thing. I mean, when families separate, I mean, there was a case in Litchfield where a guy came home from work and he found a note that his wife had left him and taken the children. He went out, got drunk, got on the highway, and seriously injured 3 people in an accident that night. I mean, what happens in our family units, and how we can help people separate in ways that don't cause cataclysmic events in their lives, where they can use the formality of the court to order their lives and to, help their kids understand that it has nothing to do with them, and that, they're going to be taken care of. If we can help people do that, I think a lot of the other problems that kind of, ripple through bad cases, loss of job, alcoholism, and all those things, maybe we can make a dent and help some kids have an experience of divorce that's better. So I thought that work was really important.
And you were chief administrative judge for that. I know the rule change went through while under your tenure.
In '97, right.
And then you were appointed to the appellate court when?
Right, in October of 2000.
So you were chief administrative judge of family for 5 years, right?
Yeah.
Or
Was it 96? 4 years.
Oh, 4 years.
Or 4
Okay.
years. Yeah, I think I was appointed in early '96. The rules finally passed the second 2 go-rounds with the Rules Committee in '97. And we started a research project, and I was involved in that. I mean, I took it very that's when I was doing a lot of work for families and,
Yeah, and you were working beyond 9 to 5.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for me, that's one of the things I remember with considerable admiration about your experience on the trial bench, the impact you made as chief family
Well,
judge.
we have in the court system support staff. I mean, family services has worked for years, I think, to educate people, educate the judges about the dynamic of childhood development and, family systems, where we can make some inroads to help and where we can't. And I think that, none of this do we do alone.
Yeah, and well, that's probably one of the lessons I certainly learned during your tenure, because I was, as you know, I was able to, I was one of your judges that
I know, and you succeeded me as administrative judge, and then joined me on the appellate court. Fast track.
Yeah. Do you want to talk? We're nearing, unfortunately, the end of the interview. So before we do that, I wonder if you want to talk a little bit about your time on the appellate court and the differences.
Yeah. Well, I was getting to the point where I was working so hard, and of course the press of all that stuff going on with teenagers at home, and I was getting really tired, and I was dreaming about a sabbatical, thinking, oh, I'm doing all this process. The process is the product in a lot of things that we do in court. And I was thinking, oh, wouldn't it be nice to really sink my teeth into something intellectual again, to get my brain back. And I was invited to the appellate court, and it's a great court. It is a court where we have great discussions, great collegiality. There were no women on the Connecticut appellate court when I was appointed. The chief judge, Antoinette Billy DuPont, who I know has been interviewed for this project. She's fabulous. I love her. She had already retired, and so they needed it. Well, and I kept hassling the powers that be that we still need more, even though you and I are there. We're only 2 of 10, and I don't think that that's appropriate. I think that there are more women on the Superior Court bench, more women practicing law, and the time that people have been in practice on the bench and eligible for these kinds of jobs, which require a little bit of experience, I think. Women are there in some significant numbers, and so I think that it continues to be a struggle to not have, oh, that seat belongs to a woman, as opposed to every seat being eligible.
Could be a woman.
For a woman. Yeah,
every
exactly.
Seat could be.
Right, every seat could be. And so we're not there yet, but I think that it's something that we need to remind people about.
No, I agree with
and
you.
not let it rest.
So you were talking about wanting to get into things a little more intellectual. Has that happened with the appellate court, or are you feeling as though
Oh no, I
it
think
isn't
it's
quite what
no, it has definitely happened, and I have. There is a certain the cadence of life is different from the trial bench to the appellate bench. The appellate bench is it's collegial decision making as opposed to sole decision making, and it is deliberative and slow. And we have time that we have to read, and we read and read and read. My frustration is I don't read anything else anymore, you know?
Yeah.
I know you're a good reader, but
the eyes give out, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I have to go home and zone out on HGTV or something, you know?
Yep, I hear you. We have a couple minutes. Is there anything you'd like to say in terms of a sum up on your career, your remarkable career as a woman in Connecticut's legal profession?
Well, I think that I've been real lucky. I think that, you know, timing in life has a lot to do with what happens to you. I think that I tell my daughters frequently that they need to be open to life, to every portion of life, because you're never going to know around the bend how life is going to unfold for you. I came of age at a time when women were being allowed in bigger numbers to take jobs and go to places that had been bastions of maleness. And so I think that seizing the opportunity and going for it is real important. And you know, every failure that I've had or every disappointment has turned into something that has worked out fabulously. And so I guess I still have the same kind of enthusiasm I had as a much younger person. The little blurb under my high school yearbook was nothing great was ever achieved without enthusiasm.
Sounds like you.
Yeah, and you know, life is so filled with, well, not only with possibility, but also with need, and to fill that and to be part of the community that supports you in a broader sense. So, you know, I think that it was a great way to live life so far, and I just hope I have, you know, a bunch more years to keep it up.
Me too.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Anne. It was a real pleasure interviewing you for this very, very interesting and worthwhile project.